Good afternoon. I'm Father John Cusick, and thank you for coming on board the First Friday Club. We made it to the month of May already. Isn't that a wonderful thing? And that's important, and it's our last time together for the 36th season of the First Friday Club. And we begin again in October. But for today, let's focus on the most important thing, and that is our speaker, Melody Hobson. And I would like to say she's a Chicago kid, and I like Chicago kids because that's a whole bunch of us. But let's put this in the context of a higher power just for a second. And gracious God, we are conscious today of so many things going on in our lives and in our world. And maybe the most dominant thing is the continued struggles of the people in Ukraine who hunger for freedom. Some hunger for food, some hunger for health care. Many have left their country in hopes that they too can come back to begin to rebuild the world of their communities and of their country. Please watch over them, watch over us, bless the work we do, and we put this day in God's hands, and we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Let me pass the baton to Lisa Parker, who is going to be in conversation with Melody today, Melody Hobson. And Lisa, go at it.
Thank you, Father Cusick. I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Melody Hobson. As Father Cusick said, she's a true Chicagoan, born and raised in Chicago. She's also the co-president and co-CEO of Ariel Investments, which is a global asset management firm. She is also the co-founder of Ariel Alternatives, a private investment initiative that's helping close the racial wealth gap. In addition to her work at Ariel, Melody is the chair of the board of the Starbucks Corporation and a director at JP Morgan Chase. She previously was the chairman at DreamWorks Animation. In 2015, Time Magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Melody is also the wife of filmmaker George Lucas and the mother to daughter Everest. Melody, obviously, you are a woman with a lot on your plate. Thank you so much for being here today. We are absolutely delighted to have you here.
Well, I am delighted to be here. And as you said, Father Cusick said it as well. I am a Chicagoan. I love Chicago more than any city in the entire world. I love Chicago. And certainly so many institutions in Chicago that are so near and dear to me are essential to our city's health and well-being. And Old St. Pat's and all of my long-term friendship and relationship with Father Wall, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, you have such an incredible bio and you have achieved so much. And one of the things as a Chicagoan that we love is hearing about your Chicago roots, which are really humble. And we just love to hear more about your background.
I've told this story many times, but as was already mentioned, I grew up in Chicago. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I grew up with a single mom. My siblings are much older than me, so I came really late in my family, which I think had a lot to do with my personality and who I am. My oldest siblings are a couple of decades older than me, so we really did have one of those, very modern families in so many ways. And my mom struggled a lot to take care of all of us and do all the things that she wanted to do for us. And that led to a childhood that had some difficulties. And I don't want to see mine was worse than anyone else's. But certainly it's something that I think lots of people listening to this would understand. We moved a lot when I was a kid, and we used to get evicted, and our phone used to get disconnected, and our lights turned off, and really bad situations were living in some of my mom's unfinished apartments, heating water. I mean, just really not great. It was interesting because I never, ever, I was so ashamed of some of the situations we had that I never, ever wanted anyone to know. So I projected something very different at school until I really came to understand that living my truth meant speaking the truth of what that experience was and I started to do so when I was in my 20s. But all of that made me absolutely obsessed with school because it was the one thing I could control. And I got to go to St. Ignatius, which was, after going to the Ogden School, St. Ignatius was formative in my life, being taught by Jesuits. And I then got to go to Princeton. And all of those things were pretty remarkable. I was the first person in my immediate family to graduate from college, and got to then go and work as a summer intern during college at Ariel Investments, and have had one job since I graduated from college. So this is my, believe it or not, my 31st year at Ariel. It's crazy. And in the most even crazier way, the first day I went to work, I knew I'd work there forever. So a lot has played out as maybe I thought, and so much more has happened than I ever could have imagined.
Wow, what an amazing life story. And, one of the things I know that you've spoken about to others was your mom's faith, and that she was Pentecostal. And how did her faith shape your faith?
Wow, that's a good question. That has many dimensions to it. So my mom was intensely religious. I mean, really, really devoted. And she had ultimate faith and trust that things would work out because she believed God would make it happen. That was powerful on so many levels. And it was extraordinarily helpful because I think we willed ourselves through some situations that weren't great. I think it was also problematic at times, because I do think that at times I would want to shake my mother by the lapels and say, we must do for ourselves, and help her to understand how important it was that we, not just wait for things to happen. And so I think that created a cognitive dissonance for me at times. In my moments of great struggle, I do find myself going and relying on the faith that I was taught by my mother and those many years of sitting with her in church. And that was really taught to me in a very different way at St. Ignatius. And I really do appreciate the fact that she allowed me to explore religion in a very complete way, as opposed to having a dogmatic approach that I had to follow her beliefs. I think that was very, very kind, brave, and generous of her to do, because she did feel so strongly about what she believed. But she allowed me to be my own person. And she exposed me and allowed me to be exposed to other thoughts. And at Ignatius especially, we were taught about world religion. I was taught that I was a Judeo-Christian. There were so many things that happened that I learned in that environment, from Buddhism to Islam to all sorts of religions, that really gave me a more complete view. And ultimately that shaped my perspective about all of these religions have different points of view, but they tend to have one God, and they tend to be centered on the same points of view, that love is the answer. And that is really where I find my strengths and in difficult moments, is just remembering that. And I don't just say, I know people say, what would Jesus do? I say, what would Jesus do? What would Buddha do? What would Muhammad do? I say all those in the same sentence. I just texted someone that the other day, because I think all of them have lives that have lived lives that we can learn from, in terms of those thoughts around love.
Wow. And, it sounds as if you really incorporated so many things about faith into your life. So do you have sort of a spiritual MO that you follow sort of in your daily life, especially since you're doing really just so very much?
A spiritual MO. I think partly, as I've already just articulated to you, is thinking of, great people in history that really were about serving others and seeing how I could learn from them. I find it super interesting that in my job, a lot of people ask me to mentor them. And I always tell them that I had great mentors. There's no question about it. People like John Rogers and others who started Ariel. But I always tell them I was mentored by Gandhi. I was mentored by Martin Luther King. I was mentored by Nelson Mandela. I was mentored by Mother Teresa because I read about them. And so when I think about my MO, around spiritual MO, I sort of lean back on what I learned about their lives and their practices and their beliefs. And almost all of them speak to service and serving others, and that your joy comes from, and your fulfillment comes from serving others as opposed to serving yourself. And I mean, even right now, I have to tell you that I've been using something as a crutch. I've had some hard weeks of just really, really, really hard work, really hard. And instead of complaining, I have these rings that I wear, but I'm wearing the Ukraine colors. The reason I'm wearing the Ukraine colors is not only because there are no words for what is happening there, obviously, but I just want to remind myself in those worst, really bad moments, I'm not in Ukraine. I have food, I have shelter, I have water, I'm in America. I want to look down in those moments where I want to complain or be, not so kind to myself or others, and just say, remember where you are, to give myself some perspective. So I have all sorts of little ways that I sort of spiritually anchor myself in maybe the reality that I want to be in. And some of them I can use, real life people who walk this planet, and also current events to take me back to those beliefs around love is the answer. So basic, but so true.
Well, that is powerful, and that is important. And you mentioned service, and I know that's a big part of your life. And you mentioned that you had a lot of great mentors. Would you mind sharing just a little bit about some of your mentors and how they've shaped your life?
Well, first and foremost, I would tell you, I think the best mentors are the ones who tell you the truth. I think a lot of people think that a mentor is there to encourage you. And that is true. But where I built my best relationships and where I took away the most was from people who didn't sugarcoat anything, and who really had my best interest at heart, and understood that in so doing, they weren't there to just tell me how terrific I was. They were there to tell me the watch outs or the things that I wasn't doing well. I told this story that is, I've told for many years now, about Bill Bradley being a great mentor to me, the Hall of Fame basketball player, the US Senator. I met him when I was 17 years old, and I was trying to decide if I was going to Princeton or Harvard. I know, a high class problem, but coming from my family, it was a big, big deal. My mother was pushing me to go to Harvard because she said, Harvard is like Coca-Cola. You could say it anywhere in the world and people understand what you're talking about. And she made this joke. She said, Princeton is like Sprite. We only know Sprite in America. She's like, Melanie, go for Coke. Now, I obviously didn't go with her suggestion, largely because I was influenced by people like John Rogers and Bill Bradley, and another Princetonian named Richard Missner, who really did take a remarkable interest in me in that decision, and taught me about how one person can really affect the life of another person. And those three people did it in their own individual ways. So Bill Bradley and I become friends. I mean, I can't even say he was a friend. I mean, that would be inappropriate at that point. I'm 17 years old, and he's, this very famous person. He then ran for president, and I helped him on the presidential run. And I started to visit him at his office when I was in New York. Sorry for such a long story, but there is a punchline here. And I've been sitting in his office one day, and he said to me, Melody, you have to be very careful that you're not a ball hog. And he used basketball language. And I said, I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, listen, you have a personality. You could go into a room and suck the life out of it. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself as I'm sitting there, don't cry. Like, that's what's going through my mind. And I'm saying to myself, if you cry, he's never going to give you feedback again. So you have to not cry. Like, I'm talking to myself in my head, but I am feeling so much pain. And I said, well, tell me more. Why do you and I'm also telling myself, he loves you, he loves you, he loves you. Like literally, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And he said, just, you have to make sure you're focusing on other people. And because you can draw a lot of attention, you have this light to you. And so if it becomes all about you, it's going to be not good. And I shifted at that moment to really try to think about how I could ask people questions about themselves and engage with them and actually not make it about me. And I found people love to talk about themselves. And the other thing he said, which was, pretty dramatic as well, he said, it'll be interesting to see if you become a fully developed person. And I'm like seriously? Like, I said, what do I have to do? And he said, there's no way to do it. We just won't know, we'll just see. So that was a challenge, for sure. And there were truths there. So, that's what I mean by it was a lot to be 23 or 24 years old and have someone tell you could be a ball hog and they weren't sure you were going to be a fully developed person. And none of it was said with any anger or any kind of meanness. It was with love. He was helping me. And to this day, I wrote him a note 2 days ago. We were communicating about something. I talked to him regularly and I said, you changed my life. So that's an example. John Rogers changed my life by giving me the opportunity at Ariel, allowing me to be the person that I am. It's weird to say this, but it's true. I've been mentored by my husband and I mentor him. I mentor John Rogers. Now I mentor Bill Bradley. The roles get reversed over time and it becomes a two-way street, not a one-way street.
Wow, that's really fantastic. And it's just really speaks a lot about you and your willingness to be open to hearing, a variety of perspectives. One of the things that we've been seeing in general are just, today's youth, especially with COVID, feeling a little bit more lost, a little bit more uncertain of their future. Do you have any advice for young adults and young people?
I'll give the advice that George gave me, George, my husband. At the start of the pandemic, I was a little like, I'd been used to being out and about and working and traveling. And so I'm getting stir crazy, right in the beginning. We're all locked in. And he looks at me and he's like, first of all, it's been a week. It's like, get a hold of yourself. He's like, secondly, Melody, during World War II, people lived in bunkers for 5 years in Europe. He's like, get a hold of yourself. He said, first of all, context and history are very important. Understand history and put context around your circumstances. And so for young people, while I know this has been incredibly traumatizing in some ways, especially, when you're young, whatever happens to you, especially as a child, it leaves a mark. I know that firsthand. Because you don't have any advanced reasoning skills. Our brains aren't even fully developed until we're about 25 years old. So even in the best of cases, it's really, really hard to process all that has happened. And I'm hoping that young people will process all of this without becoming cynical, because there is so much hope and joy and so much upside still in this world and in life. And I think it's important for us, even in our worst moments, to remember that. And that context, I think, is very, very important. So during the pandemic, I'd give a lot of Zooms and be asked by young people the same question. And I'd say something as basic as, you woke up on the right side of the dirt today. That's a gift, especially in a world in which so many people have literally died from what has occurred. So that's not something to take for granted. Maybe this horrible pandemic has affected someone close to you or someone in your family or a friend, and having to really first and foremost be grateful that you had them for however long you had them. I remember hearing a eulogy from Reverend Jackson, and he talked about Martin Luther King, and I think he only lived till he was 35 or 36. And he said, when you think about the context of a life, just think about how short that life was, but how much he got done. And so I would ask the young people right now, despite, what has looked like a very hopeless situation at times, to understand that there's always hope. And there's always hope because you're alive and you can do something. there's always the possibility of a situation being better just through our own actions, our own acts of kindness and love. Last but not least, the thing that I think fuels me and keeps me mentally sound, and I mean that, is gratitude. If you could just wake up being grateful. You know, I wake up being grateful in the weirdest ways. I still wake up in my house. I've, worked and been fine financially for decades now, but I still wake up and I say, I'm so grateful to have a place to live. I'm so grateful to have food. I'm so grateful to have, like, literally, I still say that. And so I think that keeps me very grounded and really happy at the end of the day, not taking those basics for granted. And I know some people are even struggling with those basics because I've been there. And so then ask, what can you be grateful for? During those days, I used to be so grateful for having a mother, even when we didn't have certain things, like finding things that I could hang on to that would keep me going.
Wow, it seems as if you are someone who just has a great deal of gratitude and really embraces all that life has to offer. And I remember reading an article about you years ago. I think it was in Chicago Magazine, and it talked about you getting up at 4 a.m. and going swimming. And I thought, wow, who is this woman? What's going on? And so a big part of your life also seems to be your work ethic. And I'm just wondering, what fuels you? What makes you get up at 4 a.m.?
Well, first of all, I didn't want to be hungry or poor, or, like, literally, it was just practical. Working hard was practical. My mother used to say, if you slept past 6 a.m, you were sleeping your life away. In the summer, she didn't think you should sleep past 6 on a Saturday. I mean, she would be appalled if someone woke up at noon. I mean, she thought you were a loser. I mean, literally, she would say that to us. It was rough. My mom she was incredibly direct about certain things. And she's like, what kind of life are you going to have? The day is gone. There would be this massive amount of annoyance if that happened. And so then what she would do, especially when we were kids, when I was a kid, she would find a way, I'm in high school, you've stayed up late, the vacuum would suddenly be right by your bed. She'd find a way to make sure, without telling you to wake up, that you were up. And, pots clanking, whatever it was, make the room really cold. She would do something that would make it impossible, because she wasn't going to tell you over and over again, or tell me. But, she made it very, very clear. It stuck. I started to really believe that I could get an edge. I'd have an edge on the world if I could just get a couple more hours out of the day. And so I started to think of that morning time as being sacrosanct to being productive. And that's why I started doing that. And to this day, I mean, I'm still doing the 4 a.m. thing. This week has been a little different because I did 2 back-to-back overnight flights. So I'm a little worn out. But I woke up at 4:45 today. My husband was like, wow, you're really, treating yourself. But then I feel guilt. I mean, because my mother is still looming in my mind, although it isn't past 6 a.m. for her.
Well, that's very impressive. And clearly it's working for you. And you've had a number of really just amazing roles. But as you mentioned, you've also had the same job for almost 30 years.
I should say one thing about this, though. Can I interrupt you for one second? I do think self-care is really important. And so there's a balance there that I've even struggled with and have to think about, because I'm very much about ritual and rigor of, doing things and doing what I say I'm going to do. And so giving yourself a break, or me giving myself a break, is something that takes a lot of work. And I do think that for a lot of people out there, I could do a better job of that. So I think on the one hand, this 4 a.m. thing sounds very inspiring, but I think that there is a cost at times, and it maybe would be better for me to have more sleep. So I want to be realistic in how I present this to everyone, so that they understand, even my own mind, and even in my own application of these things I'm talking about, I'm still trying to find the right balance.
Well, clearly you have a lot to balance because you're doing a lot. And so, what I was just about to ask you is how, with everything that you're doing, and you've had this job at Ariel for a very long time and really risen through the ranks, how do you stay inspired to continue working there? What about that experience inspires you?
I'm inspired by the people we work for because I think we make their lives better by growing their money. I once heard Charles Schwab, who is called Chuck Schwab, say, around Schwab, they feel like they're curing cancer. And that actually spoke to me, that the idea of giving people a better financial future by growing their money is giving them a better life. And so, people badmouth capitalism and capitalists, and I see it completely differently. That because of the work we growing someone's money who maybe is invested in our mutual fund, they can send their kid to college or buy the house that they want or start the business, or the pension fund that we work for, people can retire comfortably and have those golden years truly be golden. So I think we do work that is very, very, very important. And I think we do work that is for the better of society. And that inspires me. I'm inspired by the people I work with because I find them to be smart and challenging and problem solvers. And we're aligned around our core values of what we're trying to do to make the world a better place, because it's not just about making money. There's so much more that we want to do in this society. And I'm inspired by the problems that we confront on a day-to-day basis. This is hard. It's not the easiest thing. And so just solving problems and getting things done is very fulfilling. Warren Buffett says, do the work you would do if you didn't need a job. And that's what I feel like I do. And I do it as if I need food. I do it with the same commitment, the same drive, the same energy, because I really do love it. And people are counting on me. I always tell my colleagues at Ariel, I work for them. I do. I work for them. I work for our clients, but I work for them. They need me to work hard so that they can send their kids to college and fulfill their dreams and exceed their expectations. And I take that job seriously.
Well, you're clearly passionate about your job, and I know that you're also passionate about financial literacy. And one of the things that really struck me about that is your passion seems to stem from the idea that could help with racial equality. I'd love just to hear more about that.
I do believe that equality is economic in this country. That's what I really believe. That is what, yes, there is racial discrimination. There's conscious and unconscious bias based upon someone's race or sexual orientation or gender. All of those things I believe to be true. But one way I think you can even the playing field is economically. I think it helps a great deal. And to the extent that you've even heard at the end of his life, Martin Luther King was talking about that with Operation Breadbasket. That was about economic justice. And so this social justice that I seek is through our economy. I told you I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist with a capital C, but I do not believe capitalism has reached its full potential because it doesn't yet work for everyone. It could be more inclusive. And to the extent that it is more inclusive, it will be better for this country, for the people in it, for the world. To the extent the pie grows to be bigger, there's more. It's not a zero-sum game of you lose and I win. And so I thought about this economic equality as being really, really urgent and important to making the lives of Black and Brown people underrepresented and disadvantaged minorities in this country, to making their lives better, because I've seen it firsthand.
I was thinking about your interest and your passion with financial literacy, and I started to think, how can everyone help with financial literacy? I mean, we know how to help with, let's say, food scarcity. We can give food to a food bank, but how do you help with financial literacy?
Well, the one thing I love about financial literacy, even more than the food bank example that you use, which is incredibly important, but this is that teach a person to fish example, that is so famous, obviously, in the Christian religion, which is instead of, giving the fish, teach the fishing. And that's what financial literacy does. And the way that we have to start is to have it happen in school. You don't learn about money and investing in school in America, which puts us behind the 8 ball if you don't grow up in a home where these issues are discussed. And I say this all the time, it boggles the mind that you can take wood shop or auto in a high school today. And I always ask, who's cleaning on their own carburetor or whittling, right? No one. But the idea that you could take an elective on the stock market and investing, understanding the power of compounding, understanding how money can work for you, interest can work for you, how it can work against you. These are things that are life-changing. And ultimately, not only don't they affect your life, but they also affect the lives of future generations or generations that are in front of you. And so it's something that is a life skill. And I want that life skill to be taught at a very young age, which is what we're doing at the Ariel Community Academy, which is a small school in Chicago that we started over 2 decades ago, before there was charter legislation in the United States, that Mayor Daley gave 9 institutions the opportunity to run a school. And we took him up on it. We applied and won one of the 9. Arnie Duncan, who ultimately became the Secretary of Education, led the effort. And we created this school that has a saving and investing curriculum. We give every first grade class $20,000 real dollars to invest, and the money follows them through their grade school career, with the students taking over increasing responsibilities for managing it. When they get to 8th grade, they give $20,000 back to the first grade class to make the program self-perpetuating. And then the profits that they have, they split. Half they split amongst themselves, and any child who will put their money into a 529 plan for college, we give them another $500, just teaching them, don't walk away from the free money, which is what you'll see in your 401k plan potentially at work. And then the other half, they may have to make a philanthropic gift. 80+% of our students are on free or subsidized lunch. And one of the things we want to help them to see, this mostly all Black population of students, is that they are not just to be recipients of philanthropy. That might be the case now, but they can be philanthropists as well. So we want to teach them about philanthropy and their ability to give back as well. And there's nothing greater than empowering a child with the idea they have real money to give. So they agree on their gift that they give to the school at the end of the school year. All of this, we think, creates the opportunity for the students to be socialized in the language of money, just like you might be socialized in a foreign language. And because we start so early, it becomes something that is in their DNA. This is important because we learn all of our money habits from our parents. If the money situation and how you handle money has not been great, your child is destined to repeat it unless there's intervention around the ability to teach around these core themes.
Wow, that is a lot. And it is so wonderful to hear about how that's impacting Black and Brown communities. And I love that you're also, for those kids, bringing them back to the idea of service and philanthropy. Your specialty is money, and it could seem to everyone like you've got a completely golden life. I read about how when the 2008 economic downturn happened, how that really impacted you. So that sounded like it was a moment of challenge in your life. I'm wondering how you dealt with that challenge and how you overcome challenges when they arise.
It was a devastating time. We were losing clients every single day. It was like having pushed a huge boulder up a mountain and then having it get away from you and potentially getting wiped out by the boulder. That's what I felt like. I also felt that my personal reputation was so tied up into the reputation of Ariel. So I felt very, very defeated during that time because we weren't doing well. And I had to learn to detach myself in some ways from the company. It wasn't healthy or good. And I wanted us to do better, but that's when I learned also that sometimes you have to just wait. There's nothing more you can do. Nothing. You can't work any harder. You can't call anyone else. You can't do anymore. You have to just wait out situations. We have a turtle as a logo, and we talk about slow and steady winning the race. That doesn't mean we're sitting around doing nothing. We talk about being actively patient, but that was a period where we had to be actively patient. We were working so hard, and we were making decisions that ultimately set us up for a phenomenal recovery. We ended up being #1 in our category from the market bottom, and I think that still exists today. But at the time, it was harrowing. And what I would say is that I got through it, again, having great people to talk me through. I give the story about waking up one day and the stock market future, so it gives you a sense of what the day is going to be like. It was down over 500 points. That was a lot on the base of where the market was at the time. And it was very clear to me, it's 4 a.m. and it's going to be a horrible day, horrible. And so hours later, I'm speaking to my now husband, and he's in California. So I wait for him to wake up at 5 or 5:30. And so maybe it's 7 or 7:30 in Chicago. And I told him it's going to be a horrible day and this, that, and the other. And he said to me, he's like, Melody, what do you know that no one else knows because you're from Chicago? This is a great story for Chicagoans. And I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, come on, you know something that few people know. And I'm like, literally not a day for tests or jokes, right? And so he says, you know a lot about snowstorms. And I said, I am not tracking. He said, what do you know about being in a snowstorm or a blizzard? He said, you never look down at your feet. He said, you never look down, you never look up at the storm, excuse me. You only watch your feet. You watch your feet so you can not fall, so you can get to the next place. He said, if you look up at the storm, you're going to fall. He's like, watch your feet, stop watching the storm. And he's like, if you do that, just get from here to the next place. So I went to work that day and I said, you know what? This was in the spring. It was April. It was in the worst of it. March 9th was the low. We're still recovering from that horrible low. And I said, all we have to do, I said to the whole firm, is make it to November. And they're like, what's special about November? I said, nothing. I said, we just have to make it to November. And they said, well, what if it's not better in November? I said, I will pick a new date. I said, and until then, we're just going to watch our feet. We're going to get from here to there, and we're not going to look up at this storm. And I gave them one other perspective. I always think about the great investors. And I said, Warren Buffett is not hyperventilating. So it's like, I said, let's channel Warren Buffett. He's using this as an opportunity, which is, of course, what we did. These are the greatest values we'll ever see in our lifetime. And that's, of course, what John Rogers was doing in terms of investing. And that's what we were telling our clients. But when I'm really struggling, I go to others or I read about others to get help and inspiration. I don't have to figure it out myself. And I think being willing to say that you're afraid is something that is very, very helpful. You know, this idea of being fearless is, I don't believe in that, but I do believe very strongly in the idea of being brave. Brave is not the absence of fear. Brave is the ability to overcome it, to walk through your fear. And so you can become braver with the help of other people, especially if you let them know that you feel afraid.
Well, Melody, that was very inspirational. And I know that our time with you is running short, but I have one more question to ask you, which would be remiss if we did not ask, which is, obviously you're married. You've mentioned it to filmmaker George Lucas, who you have, fondly called Yoda's dad. You are mother to your daughter Everest, and wondering how do those relationships impact how you see the world?
They've dramatically changed how I see the world. So dramatically. So George and I dated for 7 years, and I was not going to get married. I just didn't, I didn't feel that I had to do that. And he was the one who said to me, Melody, rituals are very important, very. And he said, at the end of the day, marriage is technically a contract, but the ritual is what holds societies together. George studied anthropology. And I remember going down the aisle and getting to the front of the aisle, and Bill Moyers married us. And Bill Moyers started speaking. And he said, you know, these are two unlikely people. And I burst into tears, burst. I mean, like, really, it just overwhelmed me. And it was that idea of the ritual, you know, things that you just don't really understand until you're in them. And then you understand how it anchors the moment. And there are rituals for reasons, from christenings to bris to all of the things that exist in our society. Because I do think they're very, very important. And George helped me to see that, and how that keeps our society together, holds together families, holds together communities. Symbols and rituals end up being important. There are obviously many in religion to remind us of the values that we want to have as a society. And then for Everest, it's understanding human potential, and that it's endless, and that you could see it in a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old. And then you understand so clearly, or I understand so clearly, how that potential can be dramatically affected by circumstances. And that's not right. We should all have the opportunity to fulfill our full potential. And it should not be directly correlated to a zip code or a bank account. And we can, as a society, do better in that regard, because there are so many children walking this planet who have endless potential that becomes short-circuited by circumstances. And that is what I've seen in Everest.
Well, Melody, thank you so much for your time today. The First Friday Club of Chicago has wanted you as a speaker for years. And so we are beyond delighted to have you join us. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all that you all do.
Thanks, Melody. From one Chicagoan to another. Fabulous. Thank you. Lisa, what can I say? What a wonderful way to end the 36th year of the First Friday Club. I was only 2 when the First Friday Club began, and it's such a wonderful thing. 36 years, and what an amazing way to end our season this year with Melody Hobson. I hope those of you who have had the privilege of keying in with us today in the first Friday in May, you may want to suggest to some other people that they go on YouTube and take a good listen to the Q&A that Lisa and Melody had today. I think it ties in perfectly to the purpose of the First Friday Club, making connections between our faith, our work, and the key issues of the day. I think the insights, I was sitting here taking notes on just things that just jumped off of the screen that Melody was sharing with us. Well, that's it for the 36th year, May 2022. I hope you all have a good summer, and we're going to reconvene on October 7th, 2022. And now cross your fingers, get your vaccinations, that we can maybe come back and do this live as we did for 34 years, I think. Last time we went live was with the mayor of the city of Chicago back in March 2020. And ever since then, we've been doing these wonderful Zooms. So thank you. Have a great summer. Lisa, thank you for the tremendous gift of your insights today. What a wonderful interviewer you are. And thank everybody. Judy Murphy, who is executive director of the First Friday Club, and Maureen Murphy, president of the club, and Tom Schnecke, who does a lot of the masterful engineering and editing. We're so grateful to all of our speakers and to the board of the First Friday Club. We hope to see you in October 7, 2022. Have a good one. Bye now.